Hey guys, YouTuber 100 here, and I figured in honor of Martin Luther King Day today, and funnily enough, like this year it is on like his actual birthday. Yeah, I mean every year they try to say Martin Luther King Day is on his birthday, but yeah, it can't be like on his birthday like when they have it on like different days each year. Like sometimes they have it on like the 14th or the 16th or like 13th. Yeah, they just like have it basically I think on just the Monday that is the closest day to his birthday on the calendar. But yeah, this year they do actually have it on his actual birthday on January 15th, yeah. Yeah, so I figured in honor of Martin Luther King Day, I would do something like in honor of Martin Luther King, and so I decided to review the movie Our Friend Martin. Yeah, and you may notice like up here I do like have something new. I do have like a small Justice League portrait up here. Yeah, I just found this at Ross today, and yeah, it just looked really awesome, so I just decided to buy it. Yeah, so yeah, I now like I put it just right next to my Avengers portrait up here. Yeah, yeah, so yeah, I figure yeah, I would like now like even it up with like the Marvel stuff and the DC stuff right here. Yeah, this side comics, this side teams with Justice League and the Avengers. So yeah, but anyway, all right, so yeah, I decided to review Our Friend Martin, and yeah, I did think that this is a pretty good film. I'd say. I mean, this is a good like thing, really just about Martin Luther King and his life, really. Yeah, yeah. The story for this is just basically like learning like a little about Martin Luther King's life. I mean, it's not really like a full length story or anything, but yeah, it's just like showing like it just goes basically like through the history of Martin Luther King's life in a sense. Yeah, in this film, like there's this like African American boy, Miles, and he's like failing his history class, and he's like his teacher is threatening to hold him back like in the sixth grade for another year, and so then like there's this Martin Luther King project coming up in his school, and his school actually is like named Martin Luther King Junior School. So yeah, and so yeah, then there's this like Martin Luther King project for the class, and so then and yeah and so yeah, Miles then is just like encouraged to really like do well on this project and really pay attention because yeah, the class then like is on a field trip to like Martin Luther King's former home, which is now like a museum. Yeah, and yeah, basically just throughout this movie, like Miles and his friend Randy are like just like time traveling through Martin Luther King's life at various points. So yeah, and that's really what this film really does. It's basically about just like Martin Luther King's life and all these flashbacks and just like several different times in his life. So yeah. And this film does actually have like quite the number of big stars like providing voices in this film. Like this film is just like loaded with a ton of stars. Like this film like features like voices from people such as like Ed Asner and LeVar Burton, uh, Danny Glover, Whoopi Goldberg, Samuel L. Jackson, James Earl Jones, John Travolta, Jaleel White, Oprah Winfrey. So yeah, this film is just like full of stars providing the voices. And this film also does actually have like a couple of Martin Luther King's actual children providing voices in this film also. Like it has a Dexter King and one of Martin Luther King's sons providing the voice of Martin Luther King when he's like a full grown adult, and also has like his daughter Yolanda King providing the voice for Christine King. So I do actually think it is pretty interesting that they actually did get a couple of Martin Luther King's actual kids to provide voices in this film. Like I guess it was in honor of their father. So yeah, I did like how this film really did do that. Yeah. And this really isn't going to be like how my reviews usually are, where I like just go through the plot of the film, like and give it a rating and stuff. Yeah, this isn't going to be like a review like that. This review is going to just be like me, just really just talking about really what this film does, and just yeah, it's basically just going to talk about really like what this film does, and just about really like an adaptation, or not really an adaptation, but just like a story of Martin Luther King and what it really does. Because yeah, that's just really the best way to talk about this film. So yeah, that's really just what it is going to be about. I'm just going to talk about like how I really felt about it, and just like what it really does. And yeah, what it does do pretty well. I mean, like I said, it has like Miles and Randy, and eventually like their classmates, Maria and Kyle, end up like getting tied in with it too. They like just end up like time traveling through the course of Martin Luther King's life, just at different points, like when he's a young kid, and then when he like eventually ends up becoming an adult, all the way up to when he's fully grown. And yeah, just like journeys through like various points in his life like that. Yeah, first like when they do end up like traveling, well, they're on their class trip at Morton's former home. The museum curator, Mrs. Peck, like like lets Miles and Randy like just look at Martin Luther King's former bedroom, and then she ends up like winding up a watch that's in Morton's room that actually used to belong to him, and then it then just has like Miles and Randy just then ending up like time traveling through Martin Luther King's life. All right, sorry about that. Just like had to like do something real quick. All right, but anyway, yeah. So they end up like time traveling to like around when Martin Luther King is around like 12 years old, and I'm sure that just about all you really do know about like the Martin Luther King stuff, how like African Americans and uh, Latinos and stuff, just like people who really weren't Caucasian, were were like really being treated unfairly just because of their like the colors of their skin and stuff, how they really were different or looked seen at as different by whites. And yeah, I just really cannot stand that. I mean, I just really cannot stand racists like that who just judge people by their skin and stuff, like all that. Like, I just really cannot stand that. Like, I really wouldn't have done well in this time. Yeah, but anyway. And so, yeah, it shows like when Martin Luther King is like 12 years old, and he's playing baseball with like two Caucasian brothers, and then the mother eventually like catches them, and yeah, she just ends up like reprimanding them for like interacting with the quote unquote colors as they referred to them at the time. And so then yeah, she just ends up like taking them away from Martin, forbidding them from really playing with him. Yeah, yeah, and yeah, Martin then just like was explaining to Miles and Randy how just black people really have the hatred because they are just regarded by whites as really being quote unquote different and stuff, yeah. And he explains that the reason that really like nobody, the blacks really don't fight with them or anything is because like the violence could really just make things just worse. Years and stuff, and then yeah, eventually then like Miles and Randy eventually like time travel to another period in Martin's life when he's like it's around a few years after that whole thing that I just talked about, and he's around like about the age of 15 or something, and he's on a train, and it's shown that how whites and blacks really are just like really separated on the train, and yeah, something that this film does I actually do like is, well, I think it's interesting really. I'm not sure if I should actually say I like it, but yeah, it just like shows like at various points in this film like actual footage from like the events that this film talks about. Like it shows like all these events from things like it does show like how there were like a bunch of things just like labeled how there were a section for whites and for quote unquote coloreds. Yeah, it just like was really used for like everything. How it was used for like bathrooms and restaurants and all that other stuff, and including like the train Martin was on. Yeah, and it also like ends up like showing actual footage from like other things in this film. Like it does show the footage of like when Martin Luther King's house ended up being bombed, and it also does like show like footage of the Birmingham riot of 1963, and that scene I actually thought was done interestingly. Like that scene actually is in this movie with like where Miles and Randy are like ended up like transported to the Birmingham riot of 1963, and yeah, it shows like everything that really did happen, which I'm sure just about all of you know if you know the Birmingham riot in 1963 with like black people just like protesting, and then yeah, the police then just ended up like taking action to it with like hoses and setting off German shepherds and everything. Yeah, and I actually thought it was interesting how they actually did this scene in this movie, where like it had like this like the riot actually being animated like for this actual movie, and it also like ended up like showing actual footage from the real riot when it happened. Like it just showed a, like a part of this riot like for this actual movie animated, and then it showed the same part like being done like in with the actual footage of the real riot. So I did like how they actually did that scene. Yeah. Yeah. And it also like has some stuff for other things. Like it has Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech at the March on Washington, and I actually did like how they did that scene in this film too, where when Martin actually gave like his actual speech on the March on Washington, like it had more like animated like for this film, but for this whole thing, like it actually did like have Martin Luther King's real voice when he did the actual speech, and it actually did show like in this movie it's animated, and also like the footage from his actual speech at the real March on Washington, which I thought was good. Like I liked how they did that. And so yeah, it just has like footage like that throughout the film, where it actually does show like real footage from it. Yeah. And one of the scenes that I actually did think was pretty funny was at one point it has a when Miles and Randy are in class, and it's showing like a video of like Martin Luther King's work, and throughout the video was shown that it was all like real footage and stuff. And yeah, Miles and Kyle ended up just like being they were like talking about like everything that was actually being shown in the video, and eventually like ended up showing like Miles and Randy were like part of the video also, but they were like still animated while everything else was still like with use real footage. So yeah, I actually did think it was kind of funny how they were still animated in that real footage. So yeah, I did think that was kind of funny. Yeah, yeah, and this film also does like it also does like talk about that whole Rosa Parks stuff, like when Rosa Parks like refused to give up her bus seat to a white, and she ended up being arrested for that. So yeah, it does like yeah, it really does try to include I think just about like everything that they possibly could that was really famous about well, what people really did know about like Martin Luther King's time and stuff, with like his house bombing and Rosa Parks and all that stuff. Yeah, and it also shows how Martin Luther King was like really trying to equalize the rights for blacks and everyone, with like everything he held, with like the boycotts and the of course like the marches and stuff. So yeah, I really did like try to like really show like as much as they could in this film. So yeah, it did a good job with including like I think just about as much as they really could in this. Yeah. Yeah. And then yeah, eventually Miles and Randy ended up like paying another visit to the museum. And then yeah, Mrs. Peck like saw them again, and she was just telling Miles and Randy that they um really should not mess with the past, because if they do, it could actually like affect the present and change the course of history. So, yeah, and then like eventually like Miles and the others, and this is when like Maria and Kyle like got tied into it also. They they eventually end up discovering well finding out about Martin's murder, and so they like just felt that they could actually try to save Martin from being killed, and so they decided to just bring him to the future to uh, just show him really how the history of well how the changes that were made, since he really did like equal the rights of everyone and of all races. And so then, uh, yeah, Martin. They then like time traveled back to when Martin was 12 years old or something, and then yeah, they just then convinced Martin to come back to the future with them to their time, and so Martin then ended up agreeing. But when they ended up like traveling back to the present time, it showed that everything was just like absolutely different, and yeah, it was basically just like this, like the same as how things were like before anything Martin Luther King did. It showed that well, it was really just like Miles and Martin together, and it showed that now Kyle and Randy were like best friends together, and they just were bullying Miles and Martin, and yeah, it just was showing how really it was really just like nothing that Martin had really done before was even done at all, because Martin just he wasn't around to really do anything. None of the boycotts or the marches or anything at all. So yeah, it was just as if it was just the same as it was when before Martin did any of that, and it just were just a ton of changes. How there were no blacks in the school anymore, and the school wasn't even named after Martin Luther King anymore. It was named after Robert E. Lee, and it was shown that Maria couldn't speak English, and she was just like treated as a maid, and the school principal like just made a comment about Maria saying that they were as they were lazy enough as it is when they're not being distracted or when they're not working or something like that. It was like they're lazy enough without being bothered. So yeah, it's just shown how the whites really didn't treat any other race fairly at all, as it was before any of Martin Luther King's work. Yeah, and eventually then Martin then just realized all of this, and he just told Miles that he really had to go back, and Miles then just really ended up agreeing to it, and Martin then just like gave Miles his watch, really just I guess to remember him by. And but yeah, this is something that I've always kind of questioned. I mean, of course, like they did, I guess like they didn't know that it was really gonna be like this like bring Martin back to their time, how really none of his work really would be done. But what I didn't understand is why they really just went back to when he was 12 years old and brought him back to their time. I mean, why didn't they do this like when he was like a full-grown adult, like after like his speech at the March on Washington? I mean, I guess maybe it was because they felt like maybe with him being 12, it'd be easier to convince him and stuff. But yeah, I just really it's just something that I really was always questioned why they decided to just bring him back when he was 12 as opposed to like after he did all of his work. But yeah, and then but anyway, yeah, and then Martin then went back to his time. It showed like his house was just like completely demolished. And the museum wasn't there, but then it showed like his house just reforming itself, and Martin ended up walking in, and it was like a time travel portal, and Martin went like back to his time, and it was actually like at the time when he actually did get shot. So yeah, yeah. And then yeah, things then ended up like going back to normal and stuff. And yeah, Miles and Randy and Maria and Kyle, they were all friends and stuff. And Mrs. Peck knew about Miles time traveling and stuff. And yeah, Mrs. Peck just told Miles that despite that they can't change the past, as long as they remember Martin and what he stood for, he'll always be with them and stuff. Yeah, and yeah, of course, like after all the knowledge that Miles had gotten, he ended up then passing same his class, and yeah, he was then able to progress to his next grade and stuff, and so yeah, and then yeah, it just then like ended with like them like just vowing to continue all of Martin Luther King's work and stuff, and yeah, it just like showed them all working together. So yeah, I really do think that this film it is a pretty good film and really good stuff with Martin Luther King and stuff like a really good way to just like kind of like teach kids like about Martin Luther King's life with all the events that this film shows. And so yeah, this so yeah, would there be another one made where it would probably like be like more of like a documentary or something, um, or like more for like all ages to really see? Because yes, this film really is like a small animated film, like really geared to kids and stuff. But yeah, would they really make another one to really educate like all ages and stuff? Well, I guess maybe that could be a possibility. But yeah, as is like with this film, despite the fact that it is kind of like more like to educate kids, I think it is done pretty well. Like I do like the stuff that this film really does. So yeah, I guess like if you're interested in learning about Martin Luther King, I guess you can give this film a watch. And yeah, if you really don't know like a whole lot about him, I think you'll get a lot of education about him from this film. So yeah, if you want to learn something, I would recommend this. So yeah, that's my take on Our Friend Martin. Like it is a good film, and I do like what it does. So yeah, all right. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on it. So yeah, I hope you guys do enjoy what I had to say about this film, and so well, yeah, that's all I really have to say about it. So yeah, all right, so that I guess that's it for my review of Our Friend Martin in honor of Martin Luther King Day today. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.